We hear in our second reading today, faith is the realization of what is hoped for and evidence of things not seen. As I said at the beginning of Mass, 1 week ago, myself and 36 others from St. Paul's and Annunciation were heading to pray for about 36 hours of vigil, an overnight vigil with Pope Francis, and then Mass in the morning. And I would say that almost again, exactly 1 week ago, we were still on the road hiking there, and I was as hot and miserable as I've ever been. We had 7 miles to hike from our hotel to our campsite with 2 million of our closest friends. In the scorching heat of Poland on a 95-degree day, not a cloud in sight. Again, we were hiking 7 miles to set up a camp for that overnight vigil and Mass in the morning. While still in the midst of hiking those 7 miles, and as the crowds around us on the roads continued to grow as everyone got closer and closer to their destination, to our destination, people started coming back out from the end of the hike and telling us if we wanted our backpack of food, every person, you had a voucher for 36 hours worth of food, and it was a backpack. You could trade your voucher in and you got your food, beverages, drinks, etc. So that was a pretty important backpack. And people were telling us, you need to get in line here. So we had hiked about 5 or 6 miles, and we had 1 mile to go. But we decided this was, again, the best place to cash in our food. In fact, it was the last place to cash in our voucher and get our food. So we began to wait in line. And we waited in line for 4 hours. We got to within 15 feet of the food, and they ran out. They suggested coming back in 10 hours. At that point, drenched in sweat, I was worried that the kids and chaperones who I had convinced to come to World Youth Day were going to attack me. I would have attacked me. But they didn't. In fact, there wasn't one word of complaint, or if there was, I didn't hear it. And they kept a positive attitude, and we kept hiking to our campground. And later on that night, some of us went and got food, and no one starved. And it all worked out, and we had a beautiful night of prayer with 2 million people in adoration with Pope Francis. 2 million candles lit against the darkness, singing, praying, and then Mass in the morning with 2 million other Catholics, our Holy Father. And it was, again, an experience that will change me and stick with me for the rest of my life. But here's the point, and here's why I mentioned that. I would never have hiked 7 miles for a skit of the Last Supper. I would have never hiked 7 miles for a dramatic reenactment of the Last Supper. I would have never hiked 7 miles and slept outside for grape juice and crackers, for a passion play, for a reenactment of Good Friday, etc. Faith is the realization of what is hoped for and evidence of things not seen. I think so often we wrongly labor under the idea, we have an incomplete understanding of faith, I think, in our society. We use the word a lot, outside of the religious context. We talk about faith and we think of it as complete or blind trust. We imagine, I think, that God, in its religious sense, sprinkles faith on some people, but not on others. That's why not everyone's here at church. The magic faith sprinkler only fell on us. But the rest of the people who do not believe in God, well, God just didn't sprinkle them with the fairy dust. of faith. But what we believe as Catholics is that God pours out faith on all people. It is a gift, freely given. God sprinkles it and pours it into the hearts of everyone, unless we reject it. The people who are here because we have not rejected the gift of faith that God has given to us. And so that faith in us, then, not only is it a gift that brings us here, it begins to produce something in the hearts of every believer. Faith is evidence. It begins to produce something in us that continues to draw us on. We heard in the reading as well today that it was describing this idea that what helped Abraham was a recognition that he had trust in the promiser. Faith begins to produce evidence that keeps us here. And so it's not just complete and blind trust. And the skeptic might say, well, that's very convenient to tell everyone if you don't have faith, you're not doing it right. Keep trying harder. It's like a perpetual motion machine that you can't prove wrong. But I think, again, the answer, what we believe as Catholics, is that faith is not blind trust. Faith, the more we live it, it begins to produce something in us that is evidence that God is true, that God keeps His promises, that the Father is always telling the truth. So for the person who has no faith and who rejects the gift of faith, there's no way for that person to have that evidence start to grow and build in their hearts, because they don't give God a chance to prove His trustworthiness. Whereas Abraham's faith allowed him, and he decided and made the decision to step out into trust, and in doing so, he then started to have evidence of the truth of God, because he, again, as we heard in the reading, he recognized that God keeps His promises. Faith is not some blind thing that we do. It is something that begins, even on this side of heaven, to produce evidence and to help us see that God is real. And so our answer to the unbeliever and the skeptic is to say this: try it out. Try faith out. Try and use and allow the gift of faith that God is pouring on you. Just try it. See if God keeps His promises or not. And we all know, right? Those of us that are here, we know God does. In fact, if anyone has ever found evidence of God lying, we would all hear about it. But God has never lied. Everything that God has ever said is true. And so because of that, we take faith and trust and recognize that if I try out this faith, I am not going to be disappointed. And if the skeptic allows faith to work in their lives for a moment, they too will begin to see evidence. God does not invite people to walking around the world with a blindfold on until they die. God says if you trust and have faith, that faith will produce evidence in your hearts. It's so amazing that, in our lives we are so results-oriented, right? We're so focused on results, and the things that produce good results we keep doing, and if it doesn't, then we stop doing it. And if it's all these things, we're always paying attention to grades and all these. We're always thinking about results, except in the life of faith. We so often ignore the results of what God is doing in our hearts, and very often as well, we also ignore the results of what happens when we don't follow God's plan. when we reject the gift of faith. The fact that our lives fall apart to the lives of those who do not have God as the center of their life, it naturally devolves into chaos and madness. But those people are often looking around wondering, I wonder why I'm here in the midst of this suffering and madness and insanity. The results are ignored in that case. It says in the gospel today that the Father is pleased to give us the kingdom. God is giving us the kingdom now as we speak. He's in the middle of giving us the kingdom. It doesn't say that the Father will be pleased at the end of time to give you the kingdom. It says the Father is pleased right now to give us the kingdom. And so we believe as Catholics that what we're celebrating here at this Mass is a breaking forth of heaven into our world in a real way. It's not grape juice and crackers. It's not a dramatic reenactment. It is not a skit. Our faith tells us that this is heaven breaking forth now. God giving us the kingdom now. And that changes everything. And the more we come and the more we trust that, the more evidence begins to build in our lives that in fact God means that. That's why the church says that Sunday celebration of Mass is a non-negotiable. It is the thing that we build our entire lives around. It is the thing that we hike 7 miles or 700 miles to get to. Because it is heaven. I would not walk 7 miles in 95-degree heat with 2 million other people to run out of food simply to attend a play, a skit, or a reenactment of anything. But I would not only do all of that to go to Mass, I would even give my life before missing out on it. Because the faith and the times that I have trusted God have begun to build up a body of evidence in my heart to where I've begun to recognize that God has never lied. May more people recognize that heaven is already breaking forth into our world through the Mass. Faith is the realization of what is hoped for and evidence of things not seen. May we be open to deepening our faith in God with the sure and certain knowledge that when we have faith, we will also begin to notice the evidence of things we cannot yet see.